Project plan.
All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the City of Farmers Branch Study Session Meeting. It is Tuesday, April 19th, 2022. The time is 3 p.m. We will begin with A1, discuss regular agenda items. Councilmember Driscoll.
Nothing at this time. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Merritt.
I don't have anything at this time.
Councilmember Lynn.
You know what, I have questions on I-1 and I-8, but I think I'll wait till we get downstairs.
Okay. Councilmember Williams.
Nothing for me.
Councilmember Ratana.
I'll wait. I'll wait till we get downstairs. I'm good.
Okay. As we discussed in TIF 4's meeting, I just want to make note that we are all in agreement to move I-5 to the consent agenda. Another recommendation is, since I didn't hear any questions from anyone on I-7, are we okay moving that to the consent agenda as well?
Yes. Yes, I'm okay with
No
that.
concerns.
Any concerns? Councilmember Lynn?
I'm fine.
I didn't see like a head nod or anything. I just want to make sure everyone's good to move it to consent so that it's a clean slate there. All right, so I-5 and I-7 will be moved to consent. Seeing there's nothing else to discuss on the agenda, regular agenda items, we'll move to A2, receive North Texas Emergency Communications Center update. How you doing?
Good afternoon. I'm Terry Gelswick, the Executive Director at Intech. Just want to give you an annual report on the state of how Intech is doing and some of the stats that are currently going on. As you'll see on your screen, you'll see that last year, Intech processed 142,948 911 emergency calls and over 260,000 non-emergency calls. So we totally processed over 400,000 calls last year, which is an increase over the years past as usual. City of Farmers Branch, specifically, we did 12,358 911 calls last year. Those were telephone calls. What we're talking about now are calls for service. These are the calls that we actually dispatched a firefighter to, a paramedic to, or an officer to. Total calls for service were 5,328 for our fire department. But if you also look at that, is our average processing time. That is the time that we say hello to the time the engines are running is 1 minute and 49 seconds. So that's a really good time to have. And then our police department is 25,000 calls plus. The police department, the stats are a little harder to display because you have 9 different priority codes and some of them are delayed because of they're lower priority. They're administrative calls, so they'll wait it the next day. But all of the high priority calls, your priority Ps, priority 1s, priority 2s, are all within the minute and a half time before the Intech's call processing. That does not include what the actual field representative responded. The national standards for NENA is...
You're good.
Oh, sorry. The national standards for NENA is that we will answer 90% of our calls within 15 seconds and 95% of all of our calls within 20 seconds. As you'll see on the screen, Intech far exceeds this number by answering 99.98% of all of our phone calls within the 15 seconds that we're required to. Intech's average hold time is under 1 second. So when someone calls Intech on a 911 call, they typically get an answer within 1 second. So far exceeding the national standards. And I real briefly want to go over some of the successes that Intech has made over the last year. Intech was given the Trailblazer recognition by RQI. They're the only emergency communications center in the entire state of Texas. First one in the southern United States to get that. What that means to the residents of Farmers Branch is that if somebody calls Intech, the highly trained call takers that are answering the call are going to be able to help you give telecommunicator CPR, and they're going to give it to it at a higher level. It increases the average time from acknowledgement to hands on the chest. So we were issued that. We upgraded our public safety radio system. 100% of that was grant funded. So it cost taxpayers, local residents, no dollars. So very proud of that. That was $1 million upgrade that didn't cost the residents of Farmers Branch anything. We are currently upgrading our CAD system to the Motorola, Premier One CAD. Through our nonprofit status and through our corporate governance, we were able to save over $650,000 off of typical government pricing. So that was something we were very proud of. As I already showed you earlier, we exceeded the NENA, which is the national standards for call answering. We were the first 911 center in the state of Texas to be I3 compliant. We went on to the AT&T's ESI net, which is a 6-way redundant all-digital system for processing 911 calls. And our GIS, which is our mapping, far exceeds national standards that are required. We led the state for, I think, 2 years, and now the rest of the state has caught up with our standards. The last thing I wanted to talk about was the Star 24/7. If you don't know, the non-emergency line, people typically would call 911. Well, we created a Star 24/7 number for residents within the 4 cities that NTEC serves, and all they have to do from their cell phone is dial Star 24/7, and that will get you to NTEC without having to memorize the 7-digit non-emergency line to get a hold of the police department. So, only ones in the region that do that. And that was a very quick overview of the successes that NTEC has had. Mr. Mayor, Council, if you have any questions?
Mr. Goswick, thank you very much for your presentation. Do any council members have any questions at this time?
I have a question about the 247 number. Is it geotagged to where they know that as long as your cell phone is in Carrollton, Farmers Branch? Okay, just making sure.
You could be visiting from out of state. If you're within our geofence, it will, if you dial Star 24/7, you fly out of the area, it's not going to work. You have to be in our geographical area.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Lynn?
Yes, sir.
So when somebody calls, and I guess it was probably the third slide, maybe, that time to just a minute 49. So folks are, I'm going to ask this a different way. So is it an average minute 49 on the phone with NTEC, or is it an average of minute 49 before help is dispatched?
It is our call processing time, the time that we say hello to the time that engines are rolling. And that is an average. That does include lower priority calls as well.
Okay.
So
And what about for police?
police, it depends on the call. For, like I said, priority P, priority 1, and priority 2, they meet the standard. You have some calls that are for marshals that'll happen the next day. So that's why it's hard to give you one stat that would address all of those, because you have non-emergency and emergency calls all in
Okay.
one.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any additional questions? Mr. Goswick, thank you very much. We really
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
Thank you. Next is A3, Parks and Recreation Board Biannual Update.
All right, so where would I find the PowerPoint on here? All right. If I start messing with it, it'll go sideways.
Parks and Rec?
This is right there.
Okay.
No,
You
the
good?
next one, no, not that one.
Not that one? This
All the
one?
way over.
This one?
There, that one right there. So how do you
Okay.
start
There you
selecting?
go.
Then I just click it
Down.
down, all right. Good afternoon, my name is Bob Stewart, and I'm the chair for the Parks and Rec Board in Farmers Branch. So I always like to start off all my presentations telling people, make them aware what our mission and vision is. So our mission is to make recommendations pertaining to the operation of park facilities and recreation programs, and then forward those to the city council for discussion and approval. Our vision is to be consistently or continuously aware of what the recreational needs of our residents are, to create, repurpose, and adapt our parks and facilities to meet those needs, because our residents' needs are constantly changing, and we we want to be in front of that, so we're constantly meeting those needs. You know, we had the best Parks and Recreation staff that I've ever met or come across. I mean, they consistently exceed expectations when bringing new projects to the residents of Farmers Branch. Every year, they win awards for service excellence in areas of park, aquatics, and rec center. I mean, our aquatic center continues to be recognized on national, state, and regional levels as one of the best facilities. I mean, you can look at these on the boards for Aquatics International, the Texas Public Pool Council. I mean, it's like repetition every year. They just get better and better, and it's really been my pleasure and the Parks Board's pleasure to work with these guys, because it's always what's next, and they allow us to dream big as we're bringing new projects or suggestions to the city council. So some of our major events over the last few months, the Viva Farmers Branch, we had like 918 folks and generated $1,420 in revenue. One of our really big ones, the Blooming Bluegrass Festival, we had over 5,000 in attendance, generated 615 hotel room attendees, which the hotels are really glad to be back in business for that. And both these numbers were double from what they were in 2020, and the revenue was a little over 55,000. Then my favorite, the Halloween in the Park, we had 6,400 folks show up, generated 34,000 in revenue, and for next year, we're going to add a brews and booze booth. So we kind of get some alcohol in there so the parents can last all the way through the night. Our park board hosted the booth. We raised $250. See, it doesn't sound like a lot of money, but at 50 cents a throw, we had over 500 people. We did a cornhole toss. And man, we were just overwhelmed with kids all night long from the minute that thing opened till, I forget what time I left there, but it was a blast. And then our Christmas tree lighting, we had 5,650 people, up from 4,000 in 2019, generated 11,000 in revenue. And of course, we had our new signature 50-foot Christmas tree and some new different installations throughout the city. The rec board, we hosted a Santa Claus house, and we raised $840. So the money that the board raises goes to different children's scholarships, like the Summer Funshine Program. So it's always a great cause. So some of our numbers, examples of success, are Aquatic Center. We hit all-time highs in areas of usage and revenue. So our revenue overall was 32% increase over pre-COVID. Membership revenue was 28% over pre-COVID. And program revenue was 43% over pre-COVID. And then with the rec center, our memberships increased 28%. The membership usage increased 58%, and the revenue increased 63%. And then after we finished phase one of the downstairs at the rec center, we hit an all-time high in March of 48,000, which was a 76% increase over pre-COVID usage. So everything is just going up and up. And so with the rec center, the next phase, as you can see, I always like to show the after picture first. That's what the upstairs is going to look like once they redesign the upstairs. That's what it currently looks like. So I don't have a firm date for when that's going to start, but it's going to start fairly soon. Like everybody else, we have supply chain issues with equipment and what have you. And then some updates, the John Burke Nature Preserve, we're changing some changes. We changed the scope of the concrete pathway to be decomposed or granite. The Signature Park, officially his name is Hoya, which means jewel. And then our sand volleyball pits over across the street from the rec center, they're still under construction. We've been at the mercy of the weather and the freeze and rain and sand. You would think you could get sand, but you can't even get sand these days. Some future things we have going on. So like the top two slides is Squire Park. So it currently has like a basketball court, tables, benches, small pavilion, playground, and green space, and Some of the suggested improvements are to upgrade the basketball court, maybe add a splash pad and more inviting play structures. And then Farmers Branch Park suggested enhance the layout of the sports fields, add some pickleball courts, increase the parking capacity, and replace that chain link fence. And then with Mercer, we had a meeting with Councilwoman Rotana and the developer and the park board just a couple of weeks ago, just to kind of do a show and tell of what the park board does. And then also Mike did a presentation to the residents there so they could start determining what they would like the park to look like. So that's a work in progress. And that's it. Got any questions?
Mr. Stewart, thank you very much for your presentation and your work on our Parks and Rec board. Exciting things.
It is
essentially come-
exciting.
Yeah, so excited to hear more about that here in a second. But does any council member have any questions for Mr. Stewart at this time?
I have a question, and this may be, not to put you on the spot, this may be a Mike question, so please go ahead and throw the ball to him.
Oh, it is.
But one of the things, the numbers that have increased in the gym and the rec center, I think are fantastic. One of the things that I worry about is coming to a point where we limit non-resident memberships to ensure that new residents, because we have new residents coming on all the time, have the opportunity before there's any, and the other question would be, how far are we from capacity, right? On an everyday basis, because I want us to make sure that we prioritize our amenities to our residents. And so I see that it's become used a lot more, which I think is great. Has the board or staff thought about a plan when we get to that point to just prioritize resident memberships moving forward?
Okay, I think I'll defer to Mike on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I can answer that for you. So pre-renovation, we only had maybe 5% non-residents in the facility, so that's pretty low. So we can build that up. I will tell you from experience, we can at least double what we currently have right now. But as with everything, supply and demand. So we'll come to you with some fee increase changes at some point. We're gonna be sensitive to seniors and youth, and those that can't afford to participate, but at some point it needs to come up. We haven't had a fee increase in 17 years since it opened. CPI is 48%. So Councilman Merritt, you're well aware of the numbers. We're in essence trying to make it the same cost that it was 17 years when we opened, which is still great. So that will curb some of that growth, but yeah, we are accelerating beyond belief. And what's even more impressive with the staff that we have, Maria, Jessica, and her team, is the facilities we've talked to are still saying, oh, COVID's tough. We're at 70% capacity or 50% capacity. We're at all-time highs. I mean, we eclipsed our all-time high revenue 6 months into the year already. So we're doing okay. But we are sensitive to that. We have a plan in place to kind of make sure we don't get too high too fast.
No, and then also as far as fees too, I'd rather us, again, keep residents' costs low and our non-residents, because they're the ones that are paying for it. So just I wanted us to be mindful of that. But thank you, that's all I have.
I just have one question. You mentioned on our John F. Burke Nature Preserve that we had changed from concrete to the deconstructed granite. I don't remember that.
I can answer that one too.
Okay.
Yeah, so that night, we didn't have all the information. As we're making changes to the park, we do have to adhere to ADA standards.
Sure.
And so we went, there wasn't an option to complete the work without making sure that pathway was accessible. The best natural look was decomposed granite that fit within the confines of the budget. So that's the way we went. We can easily change that in the future, but we simply could not do the other work without going that route.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Councilmember Merritt, do you have anything?
No.
Anyone else? Mr. Stewart, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Next is A4, receive an update on current and upcoming parks and recreation projects. Mr. Mashburn.
All right. Good afternoon, Council, Mayor. Mike Mashburn, Director of Parks and Recreation. Here to give you just an update on everything we have going on in Parks and Recreation. You probably looked at your packet and thought, holy geez, we're going to be here all night. Good thing is I can give you a high-level view and go as quick or slow as you'd like to go. So I'm going to run through this. This is an impressive list, far beyond anything I've ever been a part of, but we have an impressive team in place to get that done. So I'll give you kind of a little bit of background on where we were, where we're going. Before I get started, though, I did want to recognize we have several Parks and Rec Board members, Senior Advisory Committee members, and Historical Park Board members. So thank you all for being in attendance. We appreciate your support. So in May 2021, we conducted our Citizen Satisfaction Survey. Many of you know we did really, really well in terms of city and in terms of Parks and Rec. But there was one outlier that we noticed. District 1 was a little bit underserved or felt underserved in regards to the Parks and Recreation. So we wanted to be mindful of that as we came up with programs moving forward. In January 2022, we had our strategic planning retreat with you all. You prioritized what you'd like to see moving forward. At that time, when I gave the presentation, you had said, we want the biggest, we want the best. We are a city and a park. We want to invest in Parks and Recreation. Show us the best you can come up with. So the best we can come up with a realistic budget is what I'm going to show you today. And then strategic objectives. Time and time again, this comes up. We want to be the best. We want to invest and reinvest in high-value public assets. We want to be best in class. So that's what we tried to have a mindful for as we went through these projects. And current trends. The needs of everybody are changing, whether it's our aging population, whether it's kids, and whether it's sports. What we're noticing is we have in this city a huge growing population of soccer players, and nationwide, the fastest growing sport, pickleball. And I thought I'd never say how fun it was, but thank you, Ben, for introducing me to pickleball. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I just wish Charles could have been a part of me dominating the court that day. So, a brief overview of projects. I'll go over the current projects. As you know, the John F. Burke Nature Preserve. We have a kickoff meeting, the first meeting in May. We'll begin construction later that month. Hoya, as you know, is our signature park coming online. That's moving along very, very well. We're still on track, and you should see some things starting to move closer to the end of the calendar year. So November is when we hope to have large pieces of construction kind of fly in, so that's when you're going to see things happening there. Montgomery Park is an exciting one. That was an open space of land that the school previously had. We're installing the sand volleyball courts, as you've seen. We put soccer goals back there. And we're also going to be putting some select pieces of ornamental fence to prevent balls from going down the street. I will say I hate chain link fence, so you will not see that any longer. But that's going to be a very impressive park, and that should open roughly towards the beginning of June is what we're looking at. If you've been by there, it's kind of dug out, and then we get rain, and it's a swimming pool. So maybe that's the city's first splash pad. I don't know. But Rec Center Phase 2, you've seen that. We just alluded to that. Every year has a theme, right? It's abundance of caution 2 years ago. It's an abundance of money today, right? Inflation, supply chain issues, everything is going up. And so what we wanted to do, what we showed you before, is now roughly $1.5 million. Our budget was $1 million. So what you'll see here, we'll kind of go through that. You can make a decision if you want to way scale down the project, value engineer, maybe it won't match downstairs, or do we need to reinvest a little bit more or delay some of that project to a future year. And our proposed projects, these are fun. The Branch Connection renovation, this is a really exciting project for me, and I know many of our board members here. We ran it through them. We have some very innovative ideas that we're going to show you that should suit the need of current members and then future members. Our barn-style event venue, this is one that was dusted off from several years ago. We have some great news on that. Farmers Branch Park renovation, Mayor, you had mentioned this has never been renovated probably almost as long as you've been alive, right? There was some enhancements, but very, very minimal. So we have something cool to show you there. And Squire Park, this will satisfy that District 1 reinvestment in the Parks and Recreation, and I think we got something that you'll enjoy. And then one of the things, we look at repurposing things as needs change. There's a hockey rink that very few people use. Right now, we want to repurpose that into synthetic turf fields. I'll show you what that's going to be. That's something we can do in-house, and that would satisfy some of the need for year-round play that we've talked about, and that would be a resident-only amenity. And then Recreation Center Phase 3, that's the exterior of the building. I'll talk about that in just a moment. And then, almost last, Mercer Park, that was a fun one, over on the west side of town. And then media enhancements. These are portals to the city. I think we need a wow factor when you enter into Farmers Branch. It is discernible, but I think it's time for a reinvestment after the freeze 2 years ago, the freeze this year. And I think there's some ideas that we can really make the city look good. So the branch connection, I'm super excited about this project. What we did when we designed this, we tried to come up with something that hasn't been done before to this level in this area. It's something that would appeal to 50-year-olds all the way up to 99. It's a place I want to go, and I'm a little bit jealous. I'm not quite at 50 years old, but if we do it to this level, I think we can all agree it'll be pretty cool. So proposed enhancements, we're reworking the way that facility operates in the open spaces. We're trying to make it seem more open, more airy, invite some of the sunlight in, use some of the outdoor space, and just make it more functional while still preserving the use that we use it for many of our popular programs today. Timeline for that, as you may recall, we had allocated $2.5 million of ARPA funds for this for next fiscal year to begin. So Kevin and I are working closely together on this timeline. What we intend to do is have all bids kind of ready to go to the street. October 1 is next fiscal year if we can. The estimated cost, what you're going to see is roughly $4 million. It's got an outdoor component that I think would really wow you. You can scale that down if you want, or you can say, you know what, this is great, let's go ahead and invest in that. So here's the current layout. Without taking up too much time, because we have a lot of slides to get through, the dotted lines mean walls are changing and coming open. So you can see we're making it more open, less closed off, more functional for many different uses. We ran this by the Senior Advisory Committee. They were very much in approval of this new layout. I think this works better than what the current facility is used for. This, as you go through your packets, you can look in a little bit more detail, but really, again, it just opens up the space, makes it more functional, invites gathering spaces, and there's one really cool spot that I'll show you at the end that I think would be pretty neat. So this is just an open, kind of high-level view of what the outdoor space looks like. What we're trying to do is appeal to all sorts of folks. Now, you may say, well, golly, the weather in Texas stinks, I don't want to be outside. Well, that may be true, and that may be true for some people, but I know we have a lot of seniors, Mr. Matt Rice included, that like to play basketball, right? So what we have here, which I think is pretty cool, we got a basketball/volleyball court, a sport court field, easy on the joints, bocce court, a couple of different putting greens, making use of a circular space, fire pit in the middle where we can do stage where we can do comedy shows, presentations, whatever you have out there, and a bar. Sometimes we like to drink during events, right? So, and then that kind of functions. This is on the opposite side of the building where the parking lot is. We'd actually move it to the other side, facing Farmers Branch Park, and connect all of those spaces if we go forward with this. High-level view with some color in there. You can see it's pretty impressive. This is a perforated screening, which we can brand, perhaps Farmers Branch, Branch Connection, whatever we want to do. And then here's what the interior would look like. So we create that open, airy feel, more of an elegant, high-end country club or hotel type seating, a gathering space that everybody would want to go to. This is kind of neat. We sort of patterned this off of really kind of a hip bar area. So think if you could get cold brew coffee or your espresso or whatever and hang out in the mornings for free instead of Starbucks for $7 a cup, right? Again, glass walls. We're looking at some that retracts so the whole space can be opened up or not, but you can see in it so it's less closed off. This is our game room right here. So billiards table, TV, scone sliding, and what we try to do is make the ceiling treatments a little bit more interesting. You'll notice that we did something similar in the rec center that creates just kind of a warmth to the space rather than your standard, well, this doesn't have it, but grid ceiling tiles. So we were trying to be intentional with that. Again, inviting the outdoor space in with the glass walls. And this is my personal favorite. It's a theater room, but it's more boutique style seating. The idea behind this is we can program this for presentations, Super Bowl parties, whatever the case may be, but it could also be rented out by residents free of charge. So you can gather 20 of your friends, watch your favorite horror movie, and BYOB, right? Have concessions, do that. So kind of a cool space. So the idea is we'll use it for the daytime like we currently do. We'll add some other programs, but then in the evening, maybe we can transform it and appeal to a wider variety of people. All right, so next is our barn-style event venue. So the red space is what we're focusing on today. That's just over 7,500 square feet of conditioned space. And this would be used for many different purposes, whether it's rental venues, programming, what have you. At the historical park, we're reaching all-time highs. Rentals are going through the roof right now. Programming, Hillary and her team has done a fantastic job of introducing very, very new, innovative programs that appeal to everybody and trick you into loving history, or at least that's my phrase, right? They have a lot of cool stuff, but they're maxed out because we don't have a conditioned space to have those programs. So whereas we're limited to 25, 40 people, this can seat 200 comfortably. Again, Councilman Lynn, you were in the early stages of this. We appreciate your feedback from an event standpoint, and we still implemented all your suggestions in that. So this is what you've seen before, just refreshing that. So that's the project overview, went over potential uses. We did receive a $1.4 million grant, so that kind of helps make the $4 million price tag a little bit more palatable. I do want to give special thanks to Denise Winger, Hillary Kidd, Kim Chapman, and everybody else that worked on the 150-page grant. That was not an easy one to get, but it was awarded, so we are good to go on that as long as you all are willing to front the rest of the money for that. That's your estimated cost. Again, the timeline will be dependent on if we want to move forward now and do a budget amendment to get going. We cannot legally do anything till June, though, when we formally accept the grant. At that point, we can get moving on everything. First things first, we do have 3 log cabin structures that need to be deconstructed and then moved, which we'll bring forward. If you like this project and want to move forward, we'll bring that contract forward next council meeting for you. So here's the layout. Won't go too in depth, but again, open space, making many, many uses of what we have, paying special consideration to potential wedding venues. In my mind, this is a contracted out service where we would bring in somebody that is used to doing this, reserving it for our uses, select dates and programming. So it's kind of multi-use, bring in a little bit of revenue, take some burden off that hotel occupancy tax fund. But again, using it for our use as well as expanding programming. A few quick renderings. You've seen this before, but kind of a rustic, upscale, kind of fancy look. So that's that project. We're making good progress. We're almost there, folks. All right, stay with me. Farmers Branch Park renovation. The strategic retreat, we talked about Farmers Branch Park being an area of focus and how can we reinvent this park. When you have open space and it's a little bit awkward shaped, how do you do that? I said, let's just put up new chain link fence. It'll be great. I did not say that. I hate chain link fence. So how do we reposition it where we don't need the chain link fence? And how do we make this a little bit different and more usable? So this is what we came up with. Here's the beauty of it. These right now are pictured as 2 synthetic turf fields. That can be all grass. It can be all 3 synthetic turf fields. Currently, we can fit 2 full-size soccer fields on there, which is good, but kind of a drag. 3 allows us to do tournaments, and if you play the opposite way, 7v7, you have 6 fields on there. Again, they go towards the outer part. Drainage will be solved, so you won't have that standing water like we have today. Chain link fences come down, no more. And we've added parking. Parking's an issue if you know that street. So we added parking here. This is not a cutout infield, that's for illustration purposes. That's open space right there, so you can even get a 4th field on there. Talking to our rental team, synthetic turf fields, we think we can do about $130,000 more in revenue per year if we did that, and generate 3,000 more hotel rooms. Regular grass fields, about $30,000 more per year and 1,000 more hotel rooms by this configuration. Preserving kind of an awkward walking track, the yellow part there, covered spectator seating, which we don't have right now, which is a little bit of an issue, and the mayor's favorite, 5 lit covered pickleball courts. Again, we don't have concessions out there, adding concessions, restroom, a playground on the far side there, and I think that's it. So kind of a cool layout. This hasn't been touched since you were probably a small child. Half of council was probably small children playing here for the first time. A little embarrassing to say, right? The benefits, I just kind of went over that. Again, this goes towards pickleball, fastest growing sport in the U.S. right now. Soccer, also very, very big in our community. Estimated cost of this, grass fields only, I think we can do something like this for $3 million. I am gonna preface this by saying that is a very, very moving target, like fast-moving target these days, right? Costs go up, they go down, mostly up. Supply chain issues, depending on when we approve this. So please just keep that in mind. Don't hold me to that price tag. But Councilman Merritt, you had said, we want a wow entrance. You want to know you're at Farmers Branch. I think you'll know you're there right here. So kind of a cool grand entryway. It brands the park, it brands our city. Adds a little color pop too, so people remember where we're at. Here's just a view of where those pickleball courts are, in addition to the covered seating. And another view there. So that's Farmers Branch Park. Squire Park, this is a fun one for me as well, because I go over to that district and we really came up with this, Carrie Phillips and I, when we attended Farmers Branch Night Out, or National Night Out, and we went to the party over there and we saw it activated with 100+ people. And it was amazing because this park isn't crazy highly utilized other than the basketball players, but there was families out there. It was like, if there's a purpose to go there, people will come out. We just didn't give them a good purpose to go. So they felt underserved, and so we wanted to bump this up on our list of things to do. Problem is, it's a very awkward shaped piece of land. You can see this here. I mean, my goodness, what do you do with all this? So tried to buy a house, we couldn't buy the house. We designed something anyway, and I think we nailed it pretty good. So I'll give you an overview here. Again, sport court, adding color, soft surface, highly durable basketball courts, because those are highly used. Putting those closer to the street because those are adults, you don't want kids there. Creating a centralized play structure where you can get a direct view off both sides of the street with a splash pad, covered patio gathering for large groups of people to come out, host birthday parties, what have you. In this awkward space here, put some glow swings, that'd be kind of cool at night. Something like Boston has, maybe not. But anyway, I'll show you what that looks like. So the estimated cost of this is $2 million. We feel like we can do a lot of, not all of this, but a lot of this work in-house with our construction team. And here's some renderings of what that could look like. So again, we create natural barriers with mature trees. Those will take some time to grow, kind of shield some of the houses from that. But there's our city's first splash park. I mean, that looks fun to me. I want to go. And again, you're adding color, you're adding some vibrancy to that neighborhood there. A play structure, it is see-through, so hopefully we'll deter nefarious activity in the evening time. But again, giving the kids kind of a maze-like deal to play in next to the splash pad. And then, hey, how cool is that at night, right? So, fun. I think we did okay on that one. So outdoor hockey rink conversion. I alluded to this just a moment ago. An underutilized space that needs a desperate rehab. This isn't an exact rendering, this is what I pulled offline, but this is basically what it would be. Barriers come down, we make it a synthetic turf field. You can split it if you want, but what we've talked to some of the groups about that we work with is this would be more usable with one open space. Again, we wouldn't rent this, we wouldn't look to rent this. This would be for resident open play only. That's one of the things we heard from you all in the community is we need a space to play that's open all the time, that doesn't cost money. This could be a cool use for that. We think we can do this in-house as well, or a large part of it, for about $150,000. So that's not a huge investment. All right, Rec Center Phase 3. So the exterior of the facility, a lot of times people ask, well, why would you pay attention to the inside? You're already having success on the outside. Well, over 90% of respondents in a recent survey said they will not go to a business based on what the outside looks like, and 39% said they won't do business if it doesn't match places that they typically do business with. So if you do the math, I won't bore you with the details, but in 2 years, this could pay off with a $500,000 investment. What you see here is roughly $1 million. We would value engineer this way down. A lot of the cladding you see would be paint. We would try to maintain some of the wood columns. Those wouldn't happen, but we would do the LED lights and we'd really make it pop. Think of the Mansky Library. Ben, thank you for the template. What a wonderful job you did. So I think that would be well worth the investment. It would match the inside of the facility, because for me, not that there's anything wrong with the brick, it's just dated. And the way the inside looks is contemporary and cool. So when you do the first floor, second floor, to me, I would see the pictures online and go, there's no way that looks like that inside driving by. This would make me think otherwise. So that's what that would be. Estimated cost, roughly $500,000. On to Mercer Park. So thank you, Councilwoman Ratana, Councilman Lynn, thank you for being there as well. We had a listening meeting with the residents of Mercer Park. We wanted to gather feedback from every single person in attendance. I think we had roughly around 100 people there or so. And it was really good. We kind of brought in our consultants, TMP, that will be designing this park. We gave residents a way to enter in their feedback electronically, so you could see the word cloud populate in real time of what people wanted. I told them, you tell us what you want, we'll design around that based on our funds. We have $1 million. So the top amenities that came up, believe it or not, were a basketball court, a kayak boat launch, which was one of my personal favorites, walking paths, and tennis/pickleball courts. So we have given that information to TMP, said, what can you do with this? This rendering, don't get attached to it. This is something that Centurion did briefly, and they largely got it right, but we're gonna X out this parking, because this is very valuable land space here, and do something kind of cool. This is roughly 5 acres that you see here. And so we'll have some renderings back to show you all in a couple months, but that's a start. And again, with the feedback, it was at that meeting, we invited feedback before that meeting, and we reposted the link where people could vote for a week after. We had over roughly 300 responses, so we got pretty good feedback from that. And it's $1 million budget coming out of ARPA funds. So last are median enhancements. I talked about that before. When I come to Farmers Branch, this isn't the image I want for Farmers Branch. We try and do things at a high level. This is unfortunately winter freeze, ground covering that hasn't been redone. It's maintained, it needs to be redone, right? And so right now what we're gonna propose is putting $50,000 per year in our budget to do something a little more special. And this would be an ongoing project, not solved immediately. This takes a little bit of time. But we do have the staff in place that have a lot of creative ideas to do this. What we're looking at as well is about 12 different types of plant species that do well with drought, with freeze, that are easily replaceable and low maintenance, okay? Trying to streamline this operation and still make it look really, really good. Again, we want you to know you are in Farmers Branch the second you cross that border. And Kerry Phillips and his team, I can't thank them enough for what they do. So anyways, something like this, is that a little bit more appealing? So one of the issues we come across is the trees we had before, very large mature trees, give a lot of cover, but then it makes it hard for grass to grow, or ground cover, whatever we have under there. This, you have a lot of mulch, bark, whatever you want to call it, some native grasses that don't need a lot of water, don't need a lot of maintenance. These are rose bushes, but we can put something else in there, perhaps a sage or something that would do well. And then it's lower maintenance, it looks beautiful, and we do that throughout the city. So a summary, I feel like I'm on Conan O'Brien or something, top 5. So I may hit you with a price tag and say, hey, I need $10 million to do all this stuff. You say, there's no way. So I'm gonna give you 5 first. Barn Event Center, $4 million, 1.4 is funded through a grant, so we need 2.6 for that next year if we want to do that. Otherwise, I will cry and give back $1.4 million and shred a 150-page grant. Rec Center Phase 2, we just need to complete that project. I think you've seen the return on investment that has yielded so far. We will continue onward and upward with that. I think that's well worth it. Phase 3, just to tie it all together. The Branch Connection renovation, on this, I think we have the opportunity to make a crazy big impact with our community in all different levels. There's not a active adult center, senior center, whatever you want to call it, anywhere in the area. Grand Prairie has the closest thing. This will be better. So again, we've allocated 2.5 through ARPA funds. We need another 1.5 for that. And then media enhancements for $50,000. I think that's a big impact, small amount of money in the grand scheme of things. So removing ARPA funds and grant money, that's $5.15 million for next year. Mercer Park, again, that's gonna happen. That's already been allocated, so we're at $1 million there. Farmers Branch Park renovation, I think that could be really cool, but again, it depends on what level you want to go. If you say, hey, we want turf fields, maybe that project waits, because that's gonna be $1 million or slightly more per field if you do turf fields. Squire Park renovation, again, our citizens have spoken. Police service on this side of town, I think that's a big impact, and it's the city's first splash pad, so really like that project. The hockey rink conversion, if you did all of them, that's $10.3 million. So with that, do you have any questions?
Mr. Mashburn, thank you very much. I have to say I appreciate you dreaming big and shooting for what we talked about at that strategic planning session, which was excellence across the board. And if we're going to do something we need to do it right. You know, I've had a lot of consideration about a lot of these projects and just thinking it through. And I know that 10.3 million is an expensive price tag. But when I think about what it could do for our community, what it could do for areas that haven't had a lot of investment in a long time, I think it could go a long way to continue the trajectory of growth and improvement that we've seen across our entire city. And so with that, first thing, you know, I'm thinking of a few different things. I'm going to let every council member speak first before, you know, I get into some of the other stuff. But, you know, I think there are opportunities within our community to do this together. You know, I know typically we look at pay-as-you-go is the way that we like to get things done. But I think sometimes, as we've seen with what's going on in the world, what's going on with costs, with inflation, a lot of things, you know, where are we going to be at in a few years, and what makes sense to get things done now, what makes sense to wait, and where do we want to see ourselves in a few years. Personally, I like every single project on that board. I definitely think that they would make the impact that I think that they would. And the leadership from you, your entire team, our Parks Board, our Senior Board, our Historical Park Board, we have so many facets of the community that get touched by these projects that can make a direct impact to them as well. And it's not just to the citizens of Farmers Branch, our businesses, people outside that are looking to move here, and people that we're trying to inspire to continue to move here and take advantage of all the amazing assets that we have. So, you know, I'm going to urge council, as we consider this, to think creatively and maybe consider pushing ourselves, much like we did in 2017 when we found some money to go ahead and move forward a lot of projects that we wanted to see move forward and the good that they've done. So, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, just, I mean, I think historically we've been a very conservative town. The amount of debt that we have on our books shows that. It's probably one of the lowest in DFW. And I think with the growth that we're experiencing, the growth that's on the horizon, the growth that we know that's on the books and coming, I think it's, you know, there's opportunity there to maybe get the community involved and say, let's do this all together and all at one time. I know we can't do it all at one time. We have limited staff that can only do so much. We don't want to push them too far, but to get it on the books, knowing that it's coming and that these improvements could happen is definitely something I want to urge, and something I would definitely support and promote. But with that, Mr. Cox.
Can you go back to the cost line, please?
Sure.
No, perfect. Just two things I wanted to point out here is that on the top five, I mean, those are ones that have a little bit more sense of an urgency associated with them, especially like the grant funding, as well as the two rec center, because they're kind of starting in progress. If you'll notice on the agenda, you've got the start of phase 2 of the rec center, the restrooms. One thing I want to point out is that, as you might remember, we're exceeding our general fund balance target level by the order of about $4 to $5 million. So you have that as part of this puzzle to think about. And the other thing to think about is on the branch connection. Yes, we have $2.5 million of ARPA funding. The which is predominantly going to be targeted toward the interior work. The remaining balance is predominantly on the exterior. Also keep in mind that we still have Henry S. Miller interested in a project right next door, a senior living project, and we have the chance there to, through an incentive agreement, to have them be responsible for the outdoor improvements to kind of make it more of a campus setting. So if we were looking to, as a partnership on outdoor improvements for the branch connection, that might be an opportunity as well. So I just want to mention those two things to think about when we're going around.
All right. Well, I've mostly said my piece, and we'll go around the table just to get everyone else's thoughts and opinions. Councilmember Rotana.
First, echo everything the mayor said. Thank you all so much. We are a city in a park, and so I think we need to set ourselves higher than any other of our neighbors. And so I love everything. I want us to be able to do everything and really look for innovative solutions and partnerships, as you all have done a great job with from the federal level all the way to the local level to help us make this happen. And really look forward to working with staff, mayor, our city manager to be able to do this. As far as, and you've heard me advocate for this since I got on council, making sure that we do prioritize some of the parks in District 1. I love the plans for Squire. We had an Easter egg hunt on Saturday. We had 200 people there. So to your point, if there is a reason to be there and activate that park, people will come, half of which weren't even in District 1. So that just comes to show, as long as we have the amenity, and this is not even having the amenities we could have there, right? So I would want to continue to prioritize Squire. The other thing, this is more of a question regarding to the branch connection. One of the things I've heard a lot is the need for more spaces for a lot of our families to congregate. I know that in the library that's been limited. The spaces now are smaller. The theater can't be used right now. And so I was wondering with the branch connection, if there would be a possibility to open that up to residents that, and obviously would love feedback from our from our board, just because there are, groups that congregate here, like the Cub Scouts and whatnot, that need more of these spaces. We just don't have them. And the rec center, it books up. As personally, it was months in advance. And so really, how can we kind of leverage all of these things so we can, invite others to be able to use them when they're not being used for its purpose? Because I think we could also even make a little more revenue on that as well, just to be able to pay back for the costs that are incurred with the renovations. Have you all thought about that at all?
Yeah, so I think the barn is going to help with that. If we move forward with that project, that's an open space that would satisfy a lot of needs. So the goal that I've given our team is to triple the current membership at the branch connection within a year period. So what it is today, hopefully, is more highly activated in the future. And it's taking what's always been successful and adding to. And so that's a lot of evening programming. So it's not to say it can't happen, but what we hope to do is work with the board, come up with a lot of creative programs that can be used at night as well. So if we're successful, we do our job. That will be used by those 50 and up. But again, I think the barn will help with that. And if that's a desire collectively of the council, we can reserve time, although the board may kill me, so I don't want to promise anything. There are options, right, with a few different amenities coming on.
Yeah, that's just something I keep hearing, and I don't know if any of my colleagues keep hearing that, but just the need for more spaces like that for a Cub Scout group, a Girl Scout group, because at the library it doesn't lend itself because you can't, it's too loud. And so, or it can get loud with these groups and there's just not enough big spaces like that. And so anyway, it's just something to be mindful of, especially as we kind of think innovatively around some of these new concepts. Just make sure they're also spread out all across our city. And I know eventually in the nature preserve, we may have another space there and things like that. And then another thing too is in relation to the parks. Also, for example, the event we had on Saturday, there aren't any restroom facilities in some of these bigger parks. And so how to incorporate some of that somehow, especially if we really want to, your point, activate some of these parks to have these types of events. Really, there aren't a lot of parks that lend themselves to that for more than just an hour, just because of the facilities that are needed to be able to do that. But other than that, again, love what we're doing. I think it goes along with our mission and our strategic planning meeting. I agree with the mayor in that we really do need to find some innovative funding solutions so that our taxpayers don't get the brunt of or the burden of that, but really try to find innovative options for that. And I think we can with a lot of the stuff that's coming down. So thank you so much. And I think that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Williams.
I'll just echo my Councilmember Ratana. I think I think the overall plan is fantastic. There's so many.
Yes, there is.
So I admire your breadth. Because that's a lot of asks. And so, but I think every single one of them is a great ask. And I think if we're creative, that initial, $10.3 million sticker shock, that is also a little breathtaking. If we can look at some creative ways that we can partner on our county level, on our state level, and on the federal level. I know that Chris Hall and I were just in DC at the infrastructure congressional meeting, and I know there's a lot of things out there. So I would just encourage us to look at all of those possibilities to kind of help offset some of that cost so that we can move as quickly as possible. I also know that us moving quickly as possible right now is just not going to happen because there is a supply chain issue. There is a backlog in construction. And so, I love the fact that you're prioritizing and saying, okay, we need to, before we end up with 10 projects, all at a complete standstill because we can't, get things moving. These are the ones that we got to focus on first. I love the idea of of that outdoor hockey rink. It makes me a little sad because that's where my daughter and I go and roller skate. But it's in dire need, and so I think that's a great idea, and that's the first time I've heard of that project. So I'm excited about that. I think we do need to be considerate of Mercer Park. I think that's a project that needs to be prioritized. That we were just in, meetings beforehand that talked about the contribution that west side has made to our city and to our tax base, and there needs to be a reflection of that with reinvestment in that area from our standpoint, as well. So, I'm super excited. I was at Councilmember Ratana's event this past Saturday, and I was shocked. I've driven by that park 100 times. The amount of people that were out there, the amount of community involvement in that park was amazing. And so I think with your ideas, Mike, that would really help to re-engage that area. And so I think it's greatly needed. I think that's all I had. So good job. I can't wait to see the finish out on the rec center. So I'm in there 4 times a week, and so I get to watch it and with bated breath. So I appreciate your team.
Thank you. Councilmember Lynn.
Hey, thanks, Mike, for the presentation. I don't want to get down into the weeds on all this sort of stuff, but as I was sitting here listening, I'm thinking that half of this is probably doable now, and half might take a bond election to do it. I don't think we could commit to doing projects now and then reimburse the city general coffer from a bond election, could you?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, you could, okay. So that is something to consider. The projects that you outlined, I think, are very necessary. I think they will help propel our city to a new level. I do like the idea that you have plans in here to have open spaces that will not be a cost to residents. I think that's a priority. I do think that the residents would entertain a bond election to support this. And so I would urge council to maybe consider that at some point, because this is an investment back in our city. I'm sure as time goes on, maybe new or different grants may become available. So I would hope that the staff continues to research that, because anything we can save out of our pocket would be great. And then I guess we can talk offline. I'd really like to explore a bond idea for this rather than dipping too deep into the general fund, even though the fund has a surplus. I still think we need to look for some alternate ways to finance all of this. But it's a pretty robust plan, and I commend you for putting it together.
Yeah, thank you. And I commend our team and the boards. Like I said, this is far more than any city can ever dream of, but we have the right people in place to, if we had the money, to get it all done in the next 18 months, which is pretty impressive. So take advantage of them while they're here, because they're good people.
Councilman Merritt?
Thank you. Well, Mike, you know I'm excited about it, and amongst my peers here at the table, making sure that we're conscientious of the costs, making sure that we're timing things, that we don't lose money that's already on the table, super important. Looking at those alternative fundings, but I like the idea that we have a top 5 and other things in the pipeline, so we can then continue the improvement on an ongoing basis. We know that we have a trail master plan as well, that's not part of this, but we know that one exists. So there are other, costs that are out there, and there will be other maintenance costs going on, and there will be other parts that will probably need to be upgraded as well. So it's a continuation, and if it's our, desire to be that city in the park, we have to have a plan to do that. It's a great contribution to plans that already exist, and then looking forward to them. So I commend you for that, and I look to roll my sleeves up and work with my peers here and elsewhere to make sure that we can make this come to a fruition. Thank you.
Councilman Driscoll?
Yes, thanks for the broad scheme of things. It's a lot of projects. Without trying to get into all of them, I guess going last, I can kind of summarize. Pretty much in agreement with what I've heard from, the mayor and my colleagues here. I think all of the projects that you outlined are worthy, and some of them that you went over, like the medians and some of the areas that have been really neglected and nothing's been done with it. And ever since, even before I lived here, when I would visit here, I wondered why there was a fence around that park, Farmers Branch Park. Anyway, but I think you made a good case for all of these projects. I also think, it's excellent that we've gotten that grant for $1.4 million for the barn. So, I think that's kind of a no-brainer to me that we should go forward with that. I think there's demand for it. You've shown, usership is up. People are reserving. They're looking for doing things outdoors, recreating again, and we need to capitalize on that. And also, I think with the federal dollars, the ARPA funds, and there may be more coming, that this is a unique opportunity to utilize these funds as best you can. And I like the idea of prioritizing, having, sort of top 3, 4, 5, and kind of focus on those right now. And as we all know, anything related to construction is taking longer and with higher cost. But I think we still need to move forward. And, our community's growing, more people are moving here, businesses are expanding, and that's not going to change. And I've never seen the usage in a lot of our parks that I've seen in the last couple of years. And so I'm very enthusiastic, very excited about this. And also, in terms of financing, rates are still very low historically. And there are always institutional buyers for municipal debt. So there's no problem in finding investment dollars for that, and I think that's something we need to explore, as maybe a Parks and Rec, bond. Rates are very low, and I think, this is a good opportunity to take advantage of that. And, that's all I have.
Well, I can say that Councilmember Lynn and myself are somewhat on the same page on something in terms of, what I was going to speak to kind of at the end was, I think a bond proposition for this to do it all at one time and to get the money now and to get it with a vote from our residents potentially this November to move forward with this entire plan, I think is the right course of action. I don't think that we should use all of our reserve funds to minimize that cost, maybe a portion of it, and keep this bond somewhere around $10 million, which would be about a 1 cent increase on our tax rate, depending on what we do with other stuff, what that actual impact could be later could be minimized. But I think doing that, what I would also like to see is do the full outside, add the extra 500, and do it right as it relates to the rec center, and then throw in the cost to do the trails at the park the right way. I think if we're going to go ahead and do all this, let's take advantage of what we can to make sure that everything that we're doing holds to that excellence level. And so that's what I would push for. That's what I would encourage. And I think, with potentially 3 different boards, having new amenities, a lot of different areas in our city gaining to benefit, this is something that benefits a whole group of our community. And with the team that's been in place and the success that we've seen over these last few years in our recreation departments in terms of, and with our economic development team and hospitality group, bringing in tournaments, doing a lot of this stuff, having these new fields, having better parks, having a lot of that stuff, I think you're going to see more benefit in the long run that comes back to the community to help kind of offset these costs in the future. And so, at this time, Driscoll's right. I think Councilmember Merrick can kind of weigh in that as well. I don't see debt levels getting too high that far out, but the future remains unknown in terms of what that actually looks like as we go forward. So, I would like to bring back here in the near future a conversation about us looking at potentially doing a bond election this November for this entire plan and potentially including those few other aspects that I just mentioned. Councilmember Ratano, one more point.
Yeah,
before
I
we
did.
move on.
One thing that I wanted to bring up, and you kind of mentioned it, Councilmember Williams, is it's not going to be something that's going to happen overnight. But with the revenues that we're seeing from our residents on the west side of our city, really trying to figure out some innovative ways to add some of these amenities like a satellite library, a satellite community center. And I know it's going to take innovation because we don't own any land there, just like we did with the Signature Park, right? We really were innovative in how to do that. As some of that develops, really would encourage us to keep that in mind as we move forward here over the next year, as that continues to grow, because every day we see more houses, and especially as we get a little more density there. I just want to make sure that we're mindful of that as well. Just because I know it's a conversation that we've had over the last year and a half around that too. So just wanted to note that, but I really appreciate you and putting your minds together to figure out with our economic development team, with Allison on how we can help make that happen. So thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Next, A5, review draft ordinance number 3734 for new apartment complex security requirements. Just wait a few seconds. Mr. Banana.
Oh, sure.
See,
We should have had you before the big show.
I guess so. Yeah, I'll try not to take this personally.
All right. Mr. Veneno, it's all yours.
Great. Well, please hang on to that enthusiasm for the parks presentation, because we're going to talk about security cameras. Woo! As you all know, my office has met with, back in January, we met with several apartment complexes and their owners / managers about new security measures that the council was hoping to put in place. And we spoke about that last time I was standing up here back in March. And it was decided at that time that we would hold a second meeting to try and get more of the other communities engaged in the discussion. The good news is that did work. We now have more than half of the complexes in the city have participated in this process. I have down here in the bottom paragraph, 31 individuals from 19 different complexes attended the second session, and 8 complexes were at the first.
So we're up over 20, which is more than half of our complexes. So it was good to see faces that we hadn't seen the first time around. And we did see some familiar faces too. So some folks have been very engaged in this. So what I've collected for you here, just so we're all aware, just like last time, I've given you some materials. I just want to make sure you know what you've got a hold of. You've got today's presentation. The green presentation was the second session that I gave the apartment managers and owners. And you should have the draft ordinance now. This one is redlined based off the first draft that you saw. So, based on the second session, here is some of the feedback that we got. These were kind of the big ticket items. The compliance deadline, if you recall, we pushed back a year to give complexes a chance to work it into their budgets. And that was, of course, well received. They were all happy to hear that. The biggest discussion was that the cost of implementing new systems was too high. To be very honest, I only remember that comment coming from a few individuals, but it was a loud comment. It was very important to them. Others seemed to be fairly quiet on this topic, mostly those that already have cameras in place. So they're not starting from scratch. So some folks that are starting from scratch, I think, are a little bit nervous. So I think that's why they were louder than some of the others, respectfully louder. Security systems lead to the need for more action and staff. We don't want to be police officers. We heard this last time. This is a knee-jerk reaction to something new. No one is asking again for anyone to act in a police officer capacity. The signage required by the law is too large. In the first draft that you all received, the sign requirement was 2 by 6. In this new draft, and you'll see in a future slide, I reduced it to 4 square feet, which would be like 2 by 2, based on their feedback. And no consideration has been given to complexes with courtesy officers. That is true. Courtesy officers are not in the law at all. They have never been. That might be something for you to consider as I'm here with you today. Regulations do not address buildings that lack a main entrance. There was a little bit of confusion between owners and property managers because the law says signs and cameras will go at the main entrance to various buildings. Well, some buildings don't have a main entrance, like a dwelling unit building with a breezeway. You just walk through the breezeway and you walk into your apartment. There's no main entrance there. So they were a little bit confused by that. The draft that you have in front of you actually addresses that. So I'm happy to talk about it when we get there. Improved security measures should be reserved for complexes in the mandatory crime reduction program. There was only one that made this comment, but it seemed worth noting. This particular individual said, why not just make it mandatory for those people and not the others? The city is targeting the members of the community with the deepest pockets. Will the city force single-family homeowners to install gates and cameras? I said that, in response to this, I said, no, I didn't see that happening. But they are responsible for the property maintenance code, which is a lot more than at the average apartment complex because of what we can and can't see from the road. So with that respect, I tried to make them understand that no one was being targeted. All of the complexes we have would follow the same regulations. And this kind of deep pocket theory, it does not exist. So I pushed back on that a little bit. I think, again, this is another knee-jerk reaction. If the city requires permits to implement these new security features, can the city lump all the work under one permit? I thought this was a good idea. So I asked the Deputy Director of Community Services if that was possible, and she said yes. Some arrangements would have to be made. Are all the signs the same? What are they made of? Are they too big? So we would have to look at each one as it came in to make sure that it was applicable, but that is totally possible if we wanted to do that. And then finally, complexes can't catch all offenders, so this investment isn't worth it. Why bother? I've heard this many times over my career, and the answer I give to this is always the same. You can't catch everybody, so why bother? And my response is, you can't catch every drunk driver, so why bother? You do it anyway. You catch what you can catch, and you hope that over a period of time you've made things better. But you don't just throw your hands up in the air and not try. And the room got real quiet, so I like to think that kind of made its way in. So what you have in front of you is the new Draft Ordinance 3734 that's been redlined, and here are some of the changes that are in the new ordinance in front of you. There's a new requirement that all the cameras, in fact, one of you, I believe it was Mr. Merritt, brought this to my attention. You have to have cameras, but there's no language saying they have to work. And that was very true. So we added that in there. I added a requirement that recordings have to be in color. The reduction in signage from 6 square feet to 4 square feet based on the feedback that I received. Elimination of specific language requirement for signage. In the law previously, the law said you shall have a sign that says this, and in very specific language. This property is under surveillance. Well, one of the individuals at the last session brought up some kind of legal argument, and you have to have certain language here, and you have to have certain language there. So I just took out the language requirement altogether and said, generally, you have to have signage letting people know that they're being monitored. It's now your responsibility to legally satisfy whatever those requirements are. There is a new focus on vehicles and parking areas instead of individuals entering buildings. After a discussion with the city manager and the chief of police, we talked about where the crime is actually happening, where a majority of it is happening. And it is happening in parking lots, in vehicles. That's where a majority of it's going on. And so we started talking about, is it really necessary to watch people and where they're going with respect to the interiors of buildings? So we decided together that, you know what, why don't we focus on vehicles and parking areas and see how you all respond to that. And so that's in the new draft today. There was one line that I added, the addition to the phrase "and a certificate of occupancy." If you're not in compliance with anything in the property maintenance code, an existing multifamily complex, their license every year can be withheld. And that's a violation. You shouldn't be operating without one. So there come penalties with that. Well, with respect to new complexes, they shouldn't be given a CO either. They should have their ducks in a row with everything else, their landscaping, their lighting, their buildings, their safety stuff, and cameras, if we're going to require cameras. So that's why I added that one line, and a certificate of occupancy. That would be for new folks trying to open up for business. And finally, there were just some miscellaneous changes in language to increase clarity and redundancy, just little odds and ends and grammar corrections, nothing too substantial there. So that's kind of an overview of what draft you've been provided today. Now, I do want to mention, just because I forgot last time I was with you, in both sessions, several community members, apartment complexes and managers spoke out in high praise of the police department. They commended their professionalism and their response time, and they said they were very grateful for the service they received from that department. And I kept meaning to tell you that, and it slipped my mind, and the checks the chief was writing me were bouncing. It was very awkward. But it really, they are very happy with the service they received from the police department. So I just wanted to make sure you all know that. So are there any questions I can help with? Honestly, I have, before I throw it to you, I have one question for you, which is the first two drafts are significantly different. The first draft as I told you last time I was here, kind of threw the kitchen sink in there. We want to see everybody coming in. We want to know where they're going, right? What building they're walking into and so on. Well, this draft, based on the feedback that I got, pulls it back a bit. It winds it back and it focuses on vehicles. If we can get vehicles and license plates, we know in theory who's coming off and on the property, who's going in and out of parking structures and so on. So it did dial it back a bit. So what I'm hoping to get from you all today is where I need to be. Should I be closer to the first draft? Are we in the right direction with this new draft? Whatever I can do to help finish this, happy to do. But I'm going to need some feedback because they are two very different drafts. So anything I can answer for all of you.
Mr. Bonanno, thank you very much, and thank you for holding a second meeting with what ended up being a lot more representatives from our community to get more input. So I hope you found that worthwhile.
It was absolutely, yeah.
But I'll start with Councilmember Driscoll for any questions.
I have one question. I think usually when we look at new ordinances, we kind of look at what our peer cities are doing. And I'm wondering if you did kind of a benchmarking when you first approached this, to see what, our peer cities are doing.
I did, sir, and what I found was that there are no cities doing this. I reached out to all of my contacts in regional cities, all the other code managers, and I asked, does your city have requirements for security features of some kind? And every answer I got back was no. So I was unable to compare what we're trying to do with anyone else. The only thing that I know for a fact is that the city of Dallas is planning on doing something. I don't know how far they are in the process, but we're ahead of them, and that's the way I like it. So to answer your question, I did try to find other cities, but every answer I received said, no, we don't have required security features. So it seems like we're ahead of the game.
Okay, then my second question is, you just said that in the first draft, you kind of threw everything in there, and it was the most restrictive. So why did you take that approach? And particularly when you just said the other cities aren't requiring this to begin with?
In my experience, when you're drafting an ordinance, you've got a way to see it from the enforcement side, and then you've got a way to see it from your side, which is when folks don't like it, they're reaching out to you. So what I find is to give you more than less, to give you the most ideas I can give you. I'm just going to throw everything in there, and then you all tell me, or the public tells you, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. So that's always been the way I approached writing ordinances, is to give everybody as many options as possible. And then see, it's kind of like, the analogy I use is if you had a handful of darts and a dartboard across the room, and you threw the darts at the dartboard, see what hits the dartboard. It's like that, just chuck it all and see what sticks. So that's the way I tend to approach these kinds of things. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I guess so.
Any other questions at this time? Councilman Driscoll?
No, not right now, thank you.
Councilman Merritt?
Leo, thank you for the updates and the engagement of the apartment complexes, again, that management structure. Could you help me understand the insertion of color digital into the conversation at this point?
Sure, just why color? That was my decision. I threw it in there. I thought it was beneficial to the police to have as much evidence as possible. So I figured, blue car versus red car, blue jacket versus red jacket. I thought that it would just be valuable to them. That's really all that was.
Does that exacerbate perhaps the cost equation and cost concerns that the management companies are expressing?
In my experience, and with some research I've done, and with some basic knowledge that I have, color seems standard now. You know what I mean? So, I mean, we're past the days of recording on VHS, black and white, in a gas station, you know? So I think color is pretty standard, in my opinion. So I have not, and the apartment managers did see that addition. They did see that I added color, and no one said a word.
Okay.
So I think it's pretty standard.
That's fair. You've answered the question, and just trying to have that equation, if you will. We're going to, now it's going to be 1040K, et cetera, we're upping the technology.
Yes.
And there is sometimes a cost impact to that. One thing that I haven't seen in this, and I know we talked about it the last iteration, was the education and awareness component. Help me understand how that,
Excuse me.
that's separate from the language we have here now, I understand. But what is your proposal, what is administration's proposal on making that process work, if you will?
Someone actually asked a similar question at session 2, and it was perfect because it was always part of the plan, was for me, literally me, since I'm here working on the ordinance, to visit every complex that this impacts and walk their complex with the law and say a camera goes there, and a sign goes there and there. And there are several benefits to doing that. One, they're not set up to fail because not everybody's great at reading the legalese. Two, they have now what I've been calling a security plan that I can actually bring back to our office and hand to my officers when they inspect the apartment complex. So there's that. So this was always a plan to help them through it. So that was probably my biggest investment in education would be that opportunity right there. And then someone asked in session 2, can someone come and walk my complex with me to show me that what I need to do? I said, absolutely. That was the plan the whole time. So that's where I was headed.
Sure, very good. Looking over the concerns of the attendees in the summary, we had 2 pages of them. Are there any that stick out that you feel can't be overcome, I guess? Is that the right phraseology, if you will? I mean, is there something that they're asking or commenting on here? It's a comment, I understand, that outside of our ability to address?
I'm sorry, sir, I'm not sure I understand.
Let me rephrase it. Are there concerns, something that we can feel like we can address in every case, with the exception of the cost, which we'll certainly manage, as you just said, with the walkthrough, identifying where they would need to have equipment and signage and et cetera. So is there anything that they're raising that you feel like we can't address?
Out of these top 9 or 10 items, nothing is jumping out at me.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's all.
All right. Councilmember Lund.
Thanks, Leo. So, I keep going back. I was drawn several times to the feedback page, and, the comment about, well, we have courtesy officers on site. That's a selling point, and that's what I think these people are missing. We're trying to deter crime. Having a security officer is a selling point to their tenants. It's an added bonus. That's on them. The other thing is, I don't think any complex should have to wait till they're in the mandatory crime reduction program in order to participate or have the adequate security measures on site. So I do see this as a plus for folks wanting to live in Farmers Branch, obviously. Why bother? Again, this is a deterrent. The whole program is based on trying to stop crime ahead of time and not be reactive to things. I also saw this with not so much as a focus on people, rather, but on events. You said vehicles. So who's driving in, or what type of vehicles are driving in, what type of activities going on in parking lots. And so I like that, that type of monitoring. It's got to be presented that we're not trying to monitor people necessarily. And I gathered by one of the comments, somebody was sort of sensitive to that. The only thing I would ask is if PD has anything to add to what you've put together.
Multiple departments participated in this whole process, including PD. And the chief is, of course, here today. And this latest draft, like I said earlier, we did work on the changes together. I got his feedback and then made some changes. So I am under the impression that the police department is okay. But if the chief wants to throw me under the bus, he's free to do so.
This will be very helpful, on the PD side.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Leo, thank you for all your hard work. I am concerned for our property owners, that what ends up happening is there's this added cost, and now that just gets pushed off to residents who are already paying pretty exorbitant rental prices. But at the same time, I think it's needed, and I think it's a tax on our departments that have to support those apartment complexes without security. It's a drain on our police department, and so. Do we have an idea of what the average cost is for a security system that we're requiring? I know the $800,000 one. I can't imagine what they're quoting that at. But do we have an average cost?
I don't have an average cost for you because there are too many variables.
Yeah.
I mean, we have one apartment complex that is one building with 40 units. And then we have another complex that is 573 units and 10 acres large. So there's a lot going on. And do the owners want this monitored or not? Do they have cameras already, or are they starting from scratch? There's so many variables. So I can tell you that I did some research. I just tried to find something because one of the folks in the last session did ask this question, and I explained it to him like I'm telling you. But I did look into one particular company. I just kind of shot in the dark just to see how it would work. And I found a company that charged a flat rate to install cameras. You're essentially renting them. You don't own them, which means that they install them, maintain them. They control the storage of the data. So they keep the data for 30 days, which is great because the law only requires 14. They are connected to an FBI database of criminal activity. So should a car arrive that's on that list, police gets automatically notified. The police department can actually create their own list and give it to complex managers and then say, I want to know when this car appears somewhere, and there's that. So I did look into a system like that, which seemed pretty impressive to me. And I actually did bring numbers with me, and what I did was I imagined like the smallest complex I could find, kind of the one I just described. Yep. So one camera. And then let's say 10 cameras that are geared towards catching vehicles and license plates and things like that. And what I found was that besides the installation cost, they had an annual fee per camera. And so that annual fee from 1 to 10 went from about $2,400 per year to $24,000 per year, depending on, again, the number of cameras. So I did try to ballpark it, but then again, one of the managers in the session said, we don't want wireless, we want them wired. I don't know why that is preferred, but that's one of the reasons why some quotes were massively high. Again, all we can do is set the minimum standard for what the city requires and then cut them loose to do it however they want. But I mean, I found options that seemed really affordable for a complex with 573 units. You have 573 units and you're charging an average of $1,500–$1,600 a unit. Something tells me you can afford the ones that I found.
Yep.
So, is that helpful?
Very.
Okay.
Very. So I appreciate you doing your research and your due diligence on that.
Sure.
Because I want us to be, I want us to be pro-resident and pro-business. I don't want to discourage, developers. I don't want our ordinances to become hindrances to growth. And especially if we don't see it, if we don't, we're making ordinances or we're making decisions that we're not fully looking at the long-term impact. So, but you did my work for me, Leo, so I appreciate that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Councilmember Tana.
Thank you, Leo, for all the work. I think that, this has been a conversation that I know we've been having for a very long time as a former apartment dweller myself. I agree with what Councilmember Williams just said. We want to be supportive of our residents, making sure they feel safe. Public safety is a top priority, but also making sure that we have our businesses at the table when it comes to making these decisions. My biggest thing was just, I'm a big data person, and so I wanted to have actuals, not, we think it's this, and because we've been hearing numbers all across the board. And so for me, I really wanted to see actuals just to show the example of, hey, a garden style like Ventana with 4 entrances now under the new ordinances, we got a quote for this and working with them. Whereas El Vista on the east side, based on this ordinance, we got a quote from this. So that way, there isn't this, gray area, and there's very black and white to show that, hey, this is something that is doable, especially knowing that some of them already have cameras, looking at maybe doing a listing of how many do, how many don't. For me, the way I, in working through these systems is, to kind of a point that Councilmember Driscoll made is a phased approach, right? Looking at what other cities are doing at every single component level, and then doing these phased approaches as we try this and make sure that it works, because it may, but at the same time, making sure that we do what's best for the safety of our residents. And I do like the fact that we can give our police more information. I would have liked to have known where my truck tires went at one point, right? But one of the things too is making sure that we have all of the data. And I don't know, I would like to see actuals, looking, because I think that from, and based on what you said, working with some of the managers, I think they would be amenable to doing that and saying, hey, at this complex, this is what it would cost on these 4 cameras. I think that was the biggest issue in the beginning, was having it at every single building, making sure that it touches every single, potential dark area of our apartment complex, where now we've scaled it to where it's really just, because that's the biggest thing that we've seen is the parking lots and the vehicles and the stealing of tires and catalytic converters and all of that. And so for me, I would just like to see more of the actuals and actual examples of what that would cost, to really, continue to make the case. For me, I think that giving the police, our department, the tools to be able to, get more information to apprehend some of these, and we don't know if it's a group or individuals or whatnot, but then also setting a precedent for future development. But I also don't want to deter our future developers not to want to do business with us. But I think that second meeting was very, very beneficial, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. Those would be my comments on related to that. I did have a question. It's more of an example. Based on the ordinance, let's take one of the garden style apartments. If there's only maybe 4 entrances to the huge, massive apartment complex, right? If there are only 4 entrances to that, then based on the ordinance, my understanding would be that we would only require cameras on those 4 entrances from the main street if there isn't any other exit or entrance from the rest of the garden style apartments, correct?
You're talking entrance to the premises.
To the premises, yes,
Yeah.
because those garden style apartments, there's 20 buildings, right?
Mhm, right.
And so there's ins and outs throughout the entire complex itself, but based on the ordinance, my understanding is it would only be those 4 main entrances to the entire complex, correct?
You're asking, they have 4 separate driveways onto the property? Or, yes? So then, yes, you would have 4 cameras that would catch the license plates of those folks entering and exiting. But I believe if you position your camera properly, one camera can do both.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Can
But like
catch
if
comers
there's-
and goers, you know? So-
Sure, because once you go in, there's a very long street that you have a bunch of entrances and exits to each building.
Right,
It
and
would
that has
not-
been, no, that was eliminated with this draft.
Okay.
Cameras on accessory buildings was eliminated.
Yes.
So we did, when we first started, there were many more cameras than signs. But now the only place that cameras would really be would be at the entrance and exit to the property and the entrances and exits to parking garages. That's pretty much where we're landing.
Just point of clarification,
Yeah.
because I know that was something that was an issue from the first one. And then as far as the permitting, I know that there was a mention of putting the permitting all together in more of a bulk style. Would we, because it's something that we are now making mandatory, would we, for all of those that are currently not in accordance with the statute, would we be waiving all of those fees? Or would we still will they still be responsible for all of those fees?
That would probably be a decision for the city manager to make. I can tell you automatically, the answer is no. You're not just automatically forgiven fees just because the law was passed and you are already here. So automatically, the answer is no, that does not happen. But if a policy was handed down to community services about that, then they would follow that.
And I wouldn't know what the price of that is. That was just a question that I had when I was reading through the new policy. Let's see, and I think that's all I had for my questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks. Just a few questions. Why did we choose 14 days over 7 in terms of data storage?
We started with 30. We dropped it down to 14 because we thought, they're going to want to cooperate with us. Why would they withhold the recordings? So that's how we got to 14. We just never dropped it. We just never considered 7. We wanted to give folks enough time to hang on to it. We wanted to give detectives enough time to reach out to the community. So, I mean, what if a week isn't enough? So we landed on 14. Another complex, a complex in the city spoke up at session 1 and said, we have a 14-day, retention period. 30 days will cost us more. And so that's what I picked up. And so in the draft, I said, okay, let's see if 14 flies. 2 weeks seems like enough for a detective to do his job, to me. So we never considered 7 because 14 seemed to go by okay.
Okay. I've just heard from a few apartment owners that were wondering how we arrived at that number, so I was just curious. They did say that it was part of their cost consideration.
Yeah, sure.
More data on the cloud. Obviously. To the comments about future development, this ordinance is, in my opinion, going to be just fine for future development because they can incorporate this into all of their plans and planning, and is going to be a lot easier to implement going forward than the retroactive nature. But a lot of what you've clarified here today, in my opinion, alleviates a little bit of my concerns from the retroactive nature of some of this in terms of the costs that will ultimately be passed on to the future residents. And so, that was kind of just my only concern, but, based on some of these changes, and to the points that you clarified, Councilmember Rotana, I think it's important to note that it's mainly the entrances and the comings and goings that we're focused on, because a lot of the consternation that I heard from other apartment owners was, we have 42 buildings. I cannot afford to put this on 42 buildings. And the fact that we're giving them, until 2024 to get this done, I think is, gives them enough time, given the considerations and what we're looking to do. But also, to the point on the permits, because of the retroactive nature of some of this, I would recommend that we consider post the permit fee once you pass inspection, it is given back. You know, because there is time that needs to be considered, but I also don't want to fine people for making improvements that we're retroactively making go back and do. So, and I don't think it's a lot of money, is it, Charles? But that would just be my thoughts. You at least post it, get the work done, you do it right, you get the money back.
Sure. Danielle Summers is over Community Services and Permitting, so that wouldn't be my call to make. I'm sure she would want to get with Mr. Cox and come up with a policy like what you're describing. So I can certainly pass on your feedback, but I'll stay away from permitting.
Councilmember Lynn.
I'll just say the system that Leo talked about, which is the license plate reader camera that's $2,400 a year, stores to the cloud and whatnot. There's a couple of neighborhoods in Farmers Branch that have that. It's proved to be it's an excellent tool.
Is that Flock?
It's like-
It's Flock.
It's
Flock?
Flock.
F-L-O-C-K?
Yes, yes. And
I didn't know why we were dancing around the name. I just wanted to get it out there.
So-
Staff aren't allowed to recommend service providers, so I've been calling them Company X. It just sounded cool.
It's a really, really good tool.
Yeah, and several other complexes have said other cities are looking at implementing this in pilot programs and have recommended it. So, you know, if that works, I think it's not something we're going to push on anyone, but something that if anyone's watching could consider. And I know that others have brought it up as an option that they would welcome, just so to say. So,
We
you know,
put it
point
in
to-
our neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's great.
That's why I stopped driving in there. Does anyone have any other comments or questions as it relates to ordinance 3734? Okay. Well, we'll work to get it back on a future agenda for
Okay.
potential adoption.
Okay,
All right, thanks, Leo.
thank you.
Next is A6, presentation and discussion related to allowing murals.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Good evening, everyone. Seems to be I have been following Leo from the March 22nd meeting. I'm hoping I can promise this would be the last time it would be a discussion item. Next time we'll bring back an ordinance. So crossing my fingers. We all know this mural, we have all seen this, Sundance Square, Fort Worth. This one is comparatively new in Frisco. They're doing a mural program in their Heritage Rail District. So in the March 22nd meeting, we presented 3 options, and the council feedback was to do a combination between option 1 and 2. I'm not going to belabor going back through all the options again. Just very briefly, the direction was allow murals with limited business content. Also, the direction was location-wise, allow it within any commercial areas within the city, and to seek feedback from the Art and Culture Committee. So since that meeting in March 22nd, we presented this direction to Art and Culture Committee on March 28th, actually. And the direction we got from them was they were open to the idea, they liked the idea, however, they were cautious and they wanted to start small. From a geographic area standpoint, they advised that we start with a limited area, maybe within the station area, or maybe within the cultural arts district, or maybe within the entertainment overlay district on the east side. Also, staff presented this same idea to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and their direction was, or their question was, what have we done in terms of public input to the broader general public? And that was one of the recommendations from the Planning and Zoning Commission. Since then, and I like to call it, rather than a combination of option 1 and 2, I like to call it a happy medium between 1 and 2. So we have been doing some research, going through some documents and articles and other cities' programs on murals. And we would like to present this where we propose murals to include any artistic depiction of the business-related content, but do not allow the business name or logo. I wrote this in the staff memo, which is, for example, it's a very hypothetical case. We have Cox Farms. We allow them, if they want to do a mural, and they want to paint fresh produce and fruits on the mural, that's still a mural, but don't include the Cox Farms name, because that would still be controlled by the wall sign regulations. That way, we are kind of keeping it separate. And the more I thought about it, I kind of like this option, and I wanted to get your feedback on how you feel about it. And Pete, correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like this option might stand the legal scrutiny a little bit better, because we are not making staff make a call on which portion of the mural is signed, how we control the size, and we are basically reading the mural at that point to determine whether it's a sign. So that's where we are. And also, from a smaller geographic area, we like that option that was recommended by the Art and Culture Committee. But we are open to your feedback or your suggestion if you want to start even less with the Cultural Arts District and then see how the program works. We can go through that. Making Instagram worthy murals. So some of the examples I included in your staff packet or your agenda packet. Some of the items that stood out, I took some snapshot of the Georgetown, Oklahoma program. A clear definition, what is mural and what is a sign, how we distinguish them. Avoid primary facade. What we need to think about is, say a retail building, a shopfront building. Usually those primary facades will have your storefront glasses, your openings, your access points. It doesn't give you that blank canvas. So that's why some of those codes that you will see in your packet or the recommendation says avoid primary facade, maybe allow them on the side or the rear wall, because that gives you that blank canvas. The medium of the paint or the mural matters, because permanent medium or on permanent material or surface, those are important aspects to look at when we draft the ordinance. Maintenance is also important. These can fade over time. Some of the city's mural programs, and I have some website pulled up at the end. I'm going to show some of those. They can fade over time. Maintenance is important. Also, I don't want to use the term recycle. However, over time, it has been seen in other cities' mural program. They allow the arts to change. It's almost like a program where a group of artists come together, they do a mural, and then after 2-3 years, a different kind of program comes in, a different group of artists comes in, and they repaint over those with the previous artist's permission. So it kind of evolves over time. That way it's not static. Clear and easy permitting process. With this proposal that we are presenting to you tonight, it would be really easy for staff as well as applicants to understand what is the expectation. We're saying you can do murals. We're giving them a general geographic area. We're making a very simple permitting process where they will come to community services, apply for a permit, indicate where they're going. Some of the packet material you will see, they have very good visual guide on how to apply for a mural and how they can depict which side of the building it's going, how big it is going to be, if they can have a artistic sketch showing how it's going to look like, things like that we can program in the ordinance itself. These are the resources, the website that I'm going to show you in a minute, and that's basically what I have for presentation. That's not the website. Sorry. So this is one of the oldest mural arts program from Philadelphia, of course, a much larger city. You can see all of these start with a more bigger, broader public arts focus, which we have and can build on eventually into murals. They have a map showing where their existing murals are, and you can explore them. It becomes part of tourism almost. Mm-hmm. This is Frankfort, Kentucky. Website looks very similar to ours. They have a dedicated page for public art and murals. They're describing how to submit an application, useful resources, make it easy and accessible for people, what they want to do. Closer to home, of course, City of Fort Worth. There was a presentation from 2014 in your packet, and you could see they did that presentation in 2014 to their city council. It's 2022, and of course they have come a long way from 2014. They started as a graffiti abatement program, but that morphed into this full-blown mural program in Fort Worth. So that concludes my presentation for tonight. As I said, I hope tonight we can come at a direction and move forward and bring you back an ordinance. Thank you.
Ms. Sen, thank you very much for the research and going through and speaking with some of the groups that we asked to speak to just get a little bit more input as we weigh this decision. As I've been since I brought it up, in favor. If the recommendations that are presented tonight feel good to council, I feel good making that recommendation to move forward with an ordinance that we can adopt. But I will leave that up to you all. So, Councilmember Ratana, I'll start with you.
I like the ordinance. I'm a huge fan of murals. I think it is a deterrent when it comes to graffiti. I've seen it work in other cities. I know there's some spots in my district that I know would benefit from something like this. I would definitely explore the conversation of whether with my colleagues, whether we want to do a pilot in certain areas of our city to see how it goes, and then expand it on a phased approach. But I'm definitely in favor, and maybe eventually we can get our own site like that too and have our own little hotspots of where people can take their Instagram photos. I think that would be great, especially as we develop and redevelop on all different areas of our city. So those are just my 2 cents, and happy to continue the discussion of with everyone, whether we want to do all in or if we want to pilot it in certain areas. I'll defer to you all and happy to continue the conversation.
Councilmember Williams.
I'm a huge proponent, you know I am. I love it. I love the whole idea of it. I think we should move forward with it. I can't wait till there's an action item. I think restricting it to certain areas of the city is cumbersome, and I don't see the benefit of that. We're talking about 12 miles, and we have got commercial surrounding our city. I think it's restrictive enough by saying it needs to stay in a commercial area and not a residential. So I would hate to be the one that had to field a call that said, I just don't understand. I have a huge blank wall, and I've been waiting on your murals, and yet here I am. I'm gonna wait again. And I think that it's unfortunately it's kind of a slow process to go back in and then add more areas in. So I don't see the benefit of telling other commercial areas, hey, we have this bright new shiny star over here. We know you're not so bright and new and shiny. So they get the good stuff, and you're gonna have to wait and let us see if it works out. So that would be be my only.
Great note. Great note.
That would be my only. I'll go with y'all if y'all think a pilot in certain areas is required. I think it could be seen as problematic, but I will defer to you. But I say we should be all in.
Councilmember Lynn.
Well, this is something I've wavered sort of back and forth on. I was in between 1 and 2, and I think I said it was 1.5, trying to take some of both if we were going to do this. Anytime you try to regulate something for the public, there's going to be people on either side of the issue. This is one of these things, and I'm fearful of what is liable to happen in terms of art being judged as something else, including a political statement. And a mural is art, okay? And so I'm using that as a broad term. I think there will probably need to be some type of appeal process if somebody applies to have a mural and they're turned down. What is the process to address that? What is the higher authority? I'm not looking for an answer, I'm just raising an issue.
I was only going to add, council member, is that we are not looking this process to turn down mural applications, more to actually approve as we receive them, just to keep a list. Some of the programs we saw this was a useful tool for the cities to maintain a list. For example, if we never receive an application from a business owner who wants to install a mural, and some years down the road, another person wants to do a mural actually on the same wall, how would we maintain a list? How do we actually build that program into where we can actually pinpoint on a map, okay, these are the buildings where we have murals, or which ones are installed in 2022, which ones were installed in 2025, how many years have passed, is there a maintenance requirement? So the goal is not to turn down, and maybe that's why we didn't foresee an appeals process. The only reason it would be kind of comments given back, if you will, is if they hadn't given us the full information, which is, okay, your name, the artist's name, when you were trying to install, was the size of the mural, was the medium of the paint, or, the basic information we'll ask with the mural. Does that alleviate the concern?
Okay, so that brings to mind a question that I have that I would ask you now. Not to pick on any particular business, but there is a business across the street, a tire shop, corner of B and Valley View. They essentially have a mural on their building. And the west wall of that building has had peeling paint for several years. So who enforces that? Who determines this needs to be addressed, this needs to be repainted, this needs attention to make it look whole again instead of some unsightly
Yes.
product? Okay, so you've got that. And then, again, whether people determine something being art versus some other type of statement, I don't know. And that's however the review authority is going to be set up, that's what they're going to have to go through. But there needs to be an appeal process, because if you feel like the rainbow on your building is just a rainbow, a colorful rainbow to get people's attention, and somebody else perceives it to be otherwise, who can you appeal that decision to?
Why are we looking to appeal the decision? I think the goal of what we kind of talked about a few weeks ago when we looked at this was moving more towards letting the artist art. We are not paying for these murals. So whoever owns this building is going to pay for it. And, they're going to put up what they think they need to put up. And guess what? If it's super offensive and a lot of people don't like it, they're probably not going to shop at that business. And they're going to end up having to make a change of some form. But for us to govern what art is,
I don't want to do that.
no, but then why should we govern the appeal process? If there's no appeal,
All right.
it's more of a registration is what
Okay.
we've alluded to,
All right.
is we just want to know who's doing murals and when, so that we can be like, that's an illegal mural.
Okay.
Hey, you need to go through the process and let's get you back in line, or you need to paint over it because it wasn't approved.
So the other thing was, how broad of an area do we do this? Whether it's the whole city or certain areas or zone of the city. And I would be inclined to at least start, if we were going to do this, in a limited area, limited zone, whether it's in the arts district, around the Firehouse Theater or in the station area, something limited to start. We have murals in other parts of the city. We got a big cowhead over on the east side. We've got a couple buildings that could almost be considered murals themselves with their name on the wall. So I would rather see how this works on a smaller scale first and see how it's managed before we expand it to the whole city.
Councilmember Merritt.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that you've put into it. I'm going to say that constructing buildings can be considered art. Terry, you just happened to reference some of the buildings that have what you perceive perhaps murals, but it's the color of the building. We've talked amongst ourselves about, buildings such as the Geary Music Hall in LA It's quite, complex. It's art, perhaps in a constructual way. And I think we have to separate that, the art of the building and the building construction and the colors of the building are one thing. The signage is another layer to that. And then we're talking about murals as art on facades that are there. And so I'm in support of the art of a mural, but I don't want to confuse it with the art of the building and/or the signage. And I know you've done a great job of packaging that. And I do think it needs to be understood of how the process would work. The registration, I like that term a lot better. It's the registration process, that the building owner is approving of it. We know who the artist is, we know who the materials, we know the date of the installation, those type of things. I think that makes great sense in managing this. I think the mayor makes a great point that if you put something very controversial, businesses would perhaps, be, they run the risk of doing that. So I think there's a business model that I don't think everybody's going to rush out and put a mural on their building. I think it'll be, more birds and flowers and things like that. But then again, art is in the, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But I think encouraging that is important. Sense of place, attractiveness, drawing people to our community in a positive way. And I'm going to, try to take the high road here and be in the positive way. I'm in support of trying to allow it in our city. I don't think, again, we're gonna have a big rush down at the, Danielle's office to, paint murals, but who knows? But I think there's a lot of factors in here, and what we can control is the ability to allow this. And I think we're doing the right thing in managing the difference between the structure, the sign ordinance, and the art process and the management of the registration. So I'm comfortable in that regard.
Councilman Merritt, just so that I'm clear in your direction, you would prefer citywide or a limited geographic area?
I think citywide is probably the right way to go. I think others have said if we, come out with, an area, I'd probably be okay with that. But I do think Councilwoman Williams made the point, it becomes harder to manage that expectation of why can he or she have it and I can't.
Star, the
It's
shining star.
correct. It's the shiny star. So open
Thank
to it across the city. In the in the commercial areas, we got to go back. We're not going to see this in the residential area.
Yes,
We have to
absolutely.
be clear and say that
is.
1,000 times, that it's only in the commercial areas and not on the front, as you've already pointed out. So anyway, thank you.
Councilmember Driscoll.
Yes. Again, going last, I guess I'll summarize a little bit. I agree pretty much with statements that my colleague, Mr. Merritt, just made. In general, I think murals are kind of like an outdoor art that, usually we go into a museum to see. And murals draw eyeballs and draw attention. And I think it beautifies cities and a lot of ugly urban environments. And, I think we've all seen examples of murals and how attractive they are, and they bring people, creates a sense of place. We saw that over at Lockwood when we went on the field trip a couple of months ago. We saw that when we went to near Southside in Fort Worth as well. I mean, some very simple, older buildings had been painted, had murals, and they were hopping places to have lunch, et cetera, et cetera. And to me, art is for the artist, and that's freedom of speech. And I don't think, we need to even think about trying to regulate that. And also, if someone owns a building, as the mayor indicated, they're not going to put something outrageous and offensive up there because, they'll have protests and a boycott and, how things would go on social media. So I think people will be reasonable, and look at something that will add to the community. And also just in terms of fairness, I would be in favor of opening it up. If we're going to approve it, I think I would not want to limit it to one geographic area, because if I own a business over on Midway, we're only allowing it at the, DART station, I'm going to go, well, why can't I have one? I've got this building and I would like to do that. And also, if we limit it to one area, we may not have anyone apply to or register, to have a mural. So I think, we should let the creativity go. Those are kind of my thoughts. And, last month, I missed the meeting that, I think the initial discussion on this. I was in Oklahoma City at the Congress for New Urbanism, and on several of the field trips, they highlighted the murals and how that brought activity and investment into neglected areas, and some of the artwork. It was just exceptional. And that also included on, public spaces like underpasses and things like that. It was pretty incredible. So I'm very much in favor of this, and like to see us move ahead with it.
I believe I have my direction. Thank you so much. And before I conclude, I wanted to see how it was received before I say this. The happy medium idea was actually our city managers.
Also the word registration.
Registration, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Next is A7, discuss future agenda items. Councilmember Rotana.
I do have one, and I probably should have brought it up when Mike was up there, that I think about it. It may be something for future agenda, it may be something that can be discussed with our Parks Director. But one of the things that I was wanting to explore, and it may be something that it could be a mayor's ad hoc committee, or it can be a subcommittee of Parks and, the Parks and Rec Board, but as we're revamping our parks, creating new ones, there are a number of advocates around all access parks. There's been some inquiries regarding how how all accessible is our current ADA accessible parks, and in looking at them, they're not quite as accessible as we would think. And so maybe having a subcommittee of some of those individuals that have children that would need these types of services to get their input as we branch out some of these parks to ensure that accessibility, not only on new parks, but on existing parks as well, for future changes. So again, we'll defer to staff or the mayor on that, but something I would love to explore.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Williams.
I'm good for now.
Councilmember Lynn.
Nothing.
Councilmember Merritt.
I have nothing at this time, thanks.
Councilmember Driscoll.
Not today, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to read an executive session real quick. We'll then break, grab dinner, come back, and then handle said business. Council may convene into a closed executive session pursuant to Section 551.087 of the Texas Government Code to discuss economic development incentives for Project Root Beer. Council may convene into a closed executive session pursuant to Section 551.074 of the Texas Government Code to deliberate the appointment, employment, and selection process. City manager, we will recess. The time is 5:30.